First, we begin with a potential step toward averting the looming debt ceiling crisis. President Biden sitting down with congressional leaders today to discuss the nation's borrowing limit.
Now, this meeting comes as Democrats and Republicans still appear to have made no progress in addressing the debt ceiling. The president will gather with Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, all in the Oval Office. The highly anticipated meeting comes as Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen warns that the U.S. risks defaulting on its debt as soon as June 1st.
Joining us now is CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe on what is a very green day there at the White House.
Verdict.
Ed, but is there green in our future? We know Republicans want spending cuts. Democrats want the cap lifted. Just break down for us what middle ground might emerge.
Well, we'll see. Yeah, lush here because we've been having some rain, green for money, I don't know. We're going to have to wait and see on this one. This is going to be the opening salvo of what's likely to be several weeks of protracted talks between the White House and congressional leaders, the president having the Speaker of the House, the Republican Speaker of the House, the Democratic Minority Leader, and then the Senate leaders over later today to have this discussion. They are expected to, in essence, try to sort out if there is any way to break through this and come up with a way to raise the debt limit in the coming weeks. The Treasury Department now warning that the United States could be running out of money to pay its bills as early as June 1st. So these four leaders and the president, who haven't met in several weeks on any subject, are now going to bring themselves together to try to do this. Remember, House Republicans have passed a plan that would cut about $3 trillion in federal spending over the next decade by essentially tinkering with or completely cutting big Biden administration priorities like climate change initiatives, certain health care programs, veterans health care. The White House says they would cut into law enforcement grants and even enough money to pay for personnel along the border at Customs and Border Protection, and that it's a non-starter. Most Democrats in the White House say you got to raise this limit as it's been raised dozens of times in the last 60 years or 70 years or so, and do so with no strings attached. That, of course, is a non-starter for Republicans who turn around and say, look, we're in an era of divided government. We've been elected to try to find ways to cut costs. Let's do that. Important to remember, and this is where we may see at least some basic agreement, the White House, the president, don't rule out having conversations about the federal budget that would involve spending cuts. But they would argue that's not a conversation that needs to happen until on a timeline that goes till September 30th, the end of the fiscal year. So the president's saying, you want to talk about that? Sure, let's have a budget debate that extends into the fall. But on the debt limit, on money we've already authorized to spend, that's got to be raised, and it's got to be done cleanly and quickly, and we'll see how the meeting goes.
Yeah, the budget being the future spending,
right.
The debt being the money that has already been spent and actually paying
Precisely.
those bills. You know, as you were talking about that, Ed, I'm thinking about Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, because he's been through this so many times before, has always passed it. But he says that he's going to take a back seat at today's meeting to allow his fellow Republican House Speaker Kevin McCarthy to really take the lead. He's the one pushing this negotiation point. Tell us about what is sort of happening between those two Republican leaders.
Look, he understands that Republicans actually control the House and that they passed something, but barely, with Republican votes to, in essence, address this issue. And so at least for now, publicly, Leader McConnell and about 42 of his GOP colleagues expressing support for what the Republicans passed over in the House. And he said, look, we're in an era of divided government. Republicans control the House, which is where this has got to start. The math requires careful coordination and understanding of the Republican caucus in order to get anything done. You've got to start the conversation with the Speaker. He apparently also said this to the president at some point last week as well directly. Yes, then Vice President Biden, then Senate Leader McConnell back in the day cut some deals for President Obama and Speaker Boehner when there were troubles. That isn't necessarily being ruled out, but for now McConnell at least is saying you've got to talk to the Speaker about this and his more conservative caucus. And by having Senate Republicans sign off on the deal as well, they're trying to give air cover to Republicans as they go into these meetings. But one other thing to keep in mind, there is a Republican primary in Kentucky, I believe it's next Tuesday, where McConnell himself has become the subject of attack ads, and Republicans basically dumping on the Senate leader for not being conservative enough. Let's see after the results of that, and if the McConnell-favored candidate for governor comes out on top, if the tune from the Senate leader changes. I think for now what he's trying to do is not only give air cover to the Speaker, but he understands the political dynamics at home and what's become a slightly more bitter than anticipated Republican primary for governor.
All right, good tip from Ed O'Keefe. We'll keep an eye on that. Ed O'Keefe at the White House. Thank you.
Take care.